Your daughter broke the code, period!
No, you broke her spirit!
Her voice hit first, sharp, rehearsed, self-important. Your daughter's violating Section 3B of our dress code, Margaret Corbin said, hand resting on her clipboard like a badge of command. Chloe stood trembling beside the patrol car, her floral sundress pressed against the metal door, braces glinting under the sunlight. The heat made the asphalt shimmer, but what burned more was the humiliation twisting her face. The board chair, the officer of rules as everyone called her, had flagged my daughter for a non-compliant hemline. To her, the brace straps beneath the fabric looked like decorative violations. To me, they looked like survival. I told her calmly, she has scoliosis. That dress was altered for her brace. The clipboard queen barely blinked. The HOA policy doesn't include exceptions. She'll need to accompany the officer until this is reviewed. That was when the enforcer in crimson stepped back, motioning to the patrol deputy like she'd just issued a court order. The click of handcuffs echoed before my mind caught up. My 15-year-old was being ushered into a squad car for a dress. I felt my pulse split in two, part fury, part disbelief. "Sir," the deputy said, uneasy, "I was told the HOA filed a non-compliance disturbance." That's when I dropped it, the cold reversal. "You might want to double-check who filed that. My wife runs this precinct." He froze. Even the tyrant in heels hesitated, the reflection of the cruiser lights flashing across her pearl earrings. If you've ever felt that surge, the exact second when bullies realize they miscalculated, stay here and hit subscribe right now. Because what happens next shows exactly how fast power changes hands. I stepped forward, lowering my voice so only she could hear. "You just authorized detainment under a fake ordinance. That's false imprisonment, federal level." The officer of rules tilted her head, still pretending to hold ground. "You're overreacting, Mr. Brooks." "Am I?" I said. "I wrote the HOA bylaw revisions you just violated." She blinked once, that small flicker of recognition when arrogance meets exposure. People started gathering near the sidewalks. Phones came up. Whispers spread. The illusion of order she'd built around herself began to crack. I could see my reflection in her sunglasses. A father who looked too calm for what just happened. That calm came from something deeper. Not anger, but precision. Years of watching liars bury themselves when the facts caught up. I was Daniel Brooks, federal compliance investigator turned consultant. I used to audit systems just like this. Small governing bodies bloated with ego and blind spots. I'd walked away from that life years ago, until Margaret Corbin decided to test me through my daughter. When she gestured, again, the deputy hesitated. "Ma'am, I'm not comfortable." "Proceed," she snapped. The tyrant in heels always needed an audience. "Touch her," I said quietly, "and your department will be named in the civil injunction by sundown." Something shifted in the air, a silence that wasn't peace but pressure, the kind that comes right before a storm breaks. That's when the sound of an engine rolled down the cul-de-sac. Silver Charger, tinted windows. The patrol deputy straightened instantly. Maria stepped out, badge on her hip, authority in her stride. The enforcer in crimson opened her mouth, but Maria's hand came up. Command, pure and practiced. "Release the girl." No raised voice, no chaos, just certainty, the kind that ends careers. The deputy moved fast. The handcuffs clicked open. Chloe rushed into my arms, sobbing. Margaret Corbin tried to recover. "This is an internal HOA matter." Maria cut her off. "Then consider this your first and last warning. Detaining a minor without cause is a felony. My department will handle it from here." The clipboard queen stood frozen, still clutching her binder like a shield. As Maria walked Chloe toward the car, I looked back at Margaret. "You wanted control," I said. "Now you're going to watch how real law works." The fountain behind her kept running. Perfect, polished, empty, just like her rules. The HOA board met less than 24 hours after the patrol car incident. But it wasn't to apologize. It was to investigate me. I walked into that sterile conference room at Silverwood's clubhouse knowing exactly how it would go. The scent of coffee masking tension, the chatter of neighbors pretending neutrality. At the head of the table sat Margaret Corbin, posture straight, eyes sharp, her crimson blazer like a warning light. The board chair didn't stand when I entered. She simply tapped her pen twice against her binder, that signal she used to silence the others. "Mr. Brooks," she said coolly, "the HOA must review yesterday's disruption." Disruption. That's what she called it. Not false detainment, not public humiliation. Just disruption. I noticed the clipboard queen had rearranged the seating. Officers to her right, homeowners to her left, and me dead center, like a defendant. She'd always loved theater. Behind me, whispers from residents rippled like wind through dry leaves. Everyone wanted to see how far she'd go. Even those who despised her rules were afraid to challenge her. Fear kept this place clean, manicured, and controlled. Margaret's voice carried across the table. "We have reports suggesting your daughter's behavior was non-compliant." "She was standing on our driveway," I said, "and your so-called dress code doesn't apply to minors." The tyrant in heels smirked, flipping through pages she already knew by heart. "Our regulations extend to all residents, Mr. Brooks. Exceptions create disorder. Or maybe they expose yours," I replied. Her smile faltered for a split second, a tell she didn't notice, but I did. The officer of rules was beginning to realize she wasn't just dealing with an angry father. From the corner, Officer Jenna Lee, the HOA's law enforcement liaison, avoided eye contact, her hands clasped tight, knuckles pale. I caught that flicker of guilt again, the same one I'd seen when she opened the patrol car door. "I'm curious," I said, leaning forward. "Who gave you the legal authority to detain a minor? Because unless this board has jurisdiction equal to law enforcement, you violated both state and federal law." Margaret's jaw stiffened. "You're overreaching." I almost smiled. "I used to audit compliance charters for the Department of Justice. I know exactly what authority you don't have." The enforcer in crimson stood then, pacing slowly. "Silverwood Estates thrives on order, Mr. Brooks. Maybe your family isn't suited for that." That drew a low murmur from the crowd. Some nodded, not out of agreement, but fear. She'd spent years making herself untouchable, blurring lines between policy and intimidation. I stood too, matching her height across the table. "You don't get to weaponize your bylaws against disabled children." Her eyes flicked toward Jenna. "Officer, remind Mr. Brooks of our enforcement process." Jenna hesitated, the silence stretching too long. "With respect, ma'am, I think this has already gone too far." The room went still. The clipboard queen turned slowly toward her, voice soft but edged. "Excuse me?" Jenna swallowed hard. The girl didn't resist. There was no disturbance. "We shouldn't have done that." A ripple of gasps cut through the tension. Even I felt the air shift, the first crack in Margaret's polished facade. The tyrant in heels slammed her pen onto the table. "Enough! This isn't a trial. Mr. Brooks, you're dismissed." But I didn't move. "No, Margaret. This is just the opening statement." For a moment, neither of us blinked. Her stare was ice. Mine was calculation. The difference was, I knew where her authority ended, and she didn't. As I turned to leave, I caught sight of the HOA charter framed on the wall behind her. The gold lettering gleamed like scripture, but I knew the clause she'd skipped. "No HOA shall assume powers beyond its incorporated limits." That clause was about to become her undoing. Outside, neighbors whispered as I stepped into the humid evening. The air tasted different, charged, uncertain. From the clubhouse window, I saw Margaret watching me, still clutching her clipboard like a sword she didn't know was already broken. She thought the board controlled this neighborhood. She hadn't realized yet that the law controlled her. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Chloe's small hands gripping the patrol car door, her face pale against the dark glass. The humiliation wasn't just hers, it was ours. Margaret Corbin had made sure of that. The board chair didn't simply enforce rules, she performed them. Every letter of the HOA handbook was a stage cue. Every violation a script she'd perfected. She'd convinced the neighborhood that submission meant stability, that fear was order, but fear works both ways. By morning, word had spread. Silverwood's residents were whispering about the meeting, about Jenna's hesitation, about how the clipboard queen had nearly lost control of the room. Margaret hated rumors, but she thrived on control, and this time, both were slipping away. When I stepped outside, a few neighbors waved quickly, then looked away. The air was heavy with avoidance, the kind that only exists when people know the truth but are too afraid to speak it. As I turned toward my car, Jenna was waiting by the curb. Her uniform was pressed, her expression tense, but her voice, when she finally spoke, was small. "Mr. Brooks, can we talk?" I nodded. "You shouldn't be here." "I know," she said quietly. "But you need to understand, what happened yesterday wasn't just Margaret." I studied her face. The same officer who'd looked away while my daughter was forced into a patrol car now stood trembling, eyes wet with guilt. She took a breath. "There's pressure from higher up. The enforcer in Crimson has been pushing boundaries for months, forcing us to carry out HOA interventions. She said they were legal, said the board approved them." "Did they?" I asked. Jenna shook her head. "No one checks. She drafts the memos herself. Says she has city clearance." City clearance. That was the first lie worth chasing. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. Her jaw tightened. "Because she's planning something bigger. She wants to file a formal misconduct claim against your wife. Says the captain abused her position by interfering." There it was, the next move in Margaret's game. When she couldn't win with fear, she escalated with deceit. The tyrant in heels wasn't satisfied with humiliating my daughter. She wanted to drag Maria's badge through the mud. I kept my voice steady. "If that's true, then she's crossing into criminal defamation." Jenna's eyes flicked up. "I can get you proof, but if she finds out—" "She won't," I interrupted. "But I'll need every record she's altered." Jenna hesitated, the conflict visible in every breath she took. Her fingers brushed the edge of her belt. Nervous habit, maybe fear. "She keeps them in her office, not digital, hard copies, in the binder she never lets out of sight." "The red one," I said, remembering. The same binder the officer of rules had clutched during the meeting, like it contained the universe. Jenna nodded. "You've noticed it too." "That's her control center," murmured. "If I can prove she's forged authorization forms, I can take this straight to the state compliance board." Jenna stepped back, eyes darting toward a passing neighbor. "You didn't hear this from me." I met her gaze. "You did the right thing." She almost smiled, but fear pulled it back down. "No, Mr. Brooks, the right thing's going to cost me everything." And then she was gone, slipping down the sidewalk, shoulders stiff, eyes fixed straight ahead. I stood there a moment longer, the morning light glinting off the calm perfection of Silverwood's identical lawns. Beneath all that symmetry, corruption ran quiet and deep. Inside my home, I spread out what I had: meeting notes, public minutes, archived HOA statements. A pattern was emerging: Margaret's signature where it shouldn't be, rules rewritten mid-quarter, bylaws extended without a vote. She'd built her empire out of silence and paperwork. And now, thanks to Jenna, that silence had a witness. As the sun rose higher, I knew this wasn't just about defending my daughter anymore. It was about dismantling a system that let a woman like Margaret Corbin believe she could play God with other people's lives. By the time the clipboard queen held her next meeting, she'd find her rules rewritten by me. By the end of that week, Margaret Corbin had turned Silverwood Estates into a pressure cooker. Every porch light, every trimmed hedge, every driveway looked like it had been polished under her shadow. The board chair moved through the neighborhood like a general inspecting her troops, and I knew why. She'd sensed rebellion. Flyers appeared on mailboxes. Community reminder, dress code enforcement strengthened for residents and guests. Below that, a thin line read, "By order of the Compliance Office, Chair M. Corbin." The officer of rules was tightening her grip. I stood by my window watching her pace across the cul-de-sac, red binder pressed against her chest like scripture. The clipboard queen was surrounded by 2 junior board members, both younger, both terrified to speak. "You think she knows?" Maria asked behind me, her voice low. "She suspects," I said, "but she doesn't know about Jenna." Maria crossed her arms, the captain's badge on her hip, catching morning light. "If she files that misconduct report, I'll be forced to respond through official channels. That means publicity." "That's what she wants," I said quietly. "A spectacle. Control through scandal." The tyrant in heels thrived on humiliation, not just enforcing rules, but bending them until people broke beneath them. And if she couldn't control me through my daughter, she'd target my wife's badge. I pulled out the files Jenna had leaked. meeting minutes with mismatched timestamps, letters supposedly approved by the Municipal Oversight Liaison, a title that didn't even exist. Margaret had forged entire chains of authority. She wasn't just overstepping, she was building a false government. That night, I attended the HOA's emergency assembly. The community hall smelled like disinfectant and fake floral air freshener. The moment I entered, the air shifted. Low murmurs, wary eyes. At the podium stood the enforcer in crimson, her red blazer vivid against the sterile white walls. She smiled like a performer greeting an audience. Before we begin, I'd like to remind everyone this is a civil meeting. Respectful conduct only. Her eyes flicked to me. I took a seat near the front, just close enough for her to know I wasn't hiding. Margaret cleared her throat. Recent incidents have brought unwanted attention to our community. One resident's family has engaged in disruptive conduct, including interference with HOA operations. Whispers rose instantly. Neighbors glanced my way. She continued, voice cool and precise. The board is currently reviewing Captain Maria Brooks's actions for potential violation of Section 14, obstruction of community enforcement. Maria squeezed my hand. "Let her finish," I whispered. The officer of rules flipped through her binder, the red one Jenna had mentioned. I could see tabs labeled sanctions, evidence, and complaint templates. "However," she went on, "we have also discovered unauthorized data access from a private source connected to the Department of Justice." A murmur of disbelief swept through the room. She was accusing me now, of hacking, no doubt. I stood slowly. "You're accusing a federal compliance auditor of breaching privacy?" Her smile didn't waver. "I'm simply presenting what the system detected." "Your system?" I asked. "You mean the one installed under your supervision without a vote? The same surveillance suite that records homeowners' cameras through the HOA's shared server?" The silence that followed was electric. The clipboard queen blinked, once, then twice. She hadn't expected me to know that yet. I turned toward the crowd. "Your homes are being monitored illegally. Your gate logs, security feeds, all routed through her private access line." Someone in the back shouted, "Is that true?" The board chair slammed her binder shut. "Mr. Brooks is misrepresenting." "No," I said. "I traced the IP address myself. It routes to her home router." Neighbors began murmuring louder now. Some stood up. The power balance tilted before her eyes. Margaret's hand trembled just enough for me to notice. The tyrant in heels had never faced a crowd she couldn't silence. I walked up to the podium, voice steady. "You wanted to make an example of my family. You did, but the next example will be yours, in front of the county ethics board." Her jaw tightened. "You're bluffing." I leaned in slightly. "Then I'll see you at the hearing." The moment hung heavy. The illusion of authority cracked. When I walked out, I heard her voice behind me, low and venomous. "You think you can beat me with paperwork?" I didn't turn around. "No," I said, "with proof." The morning after the meeting, Silverwood felt different. The same manicured lawns and polished driveways remained, but the air was sharper, like the community was holding its breath. I knew the board chair would strike back. Margaret Corbin didn't lose control and simply walk away. I spent the early hours combing through HOA financials. Every report was public record, but the deeper I went, the stranger it got. Budgets weren't aligning. Maintenance contracts were doubled in value. Payments funneled through a company I'd never heard of, Crimson Partners LLC. Even her shell company wore her signature color. By 8 a.m., I heard it. The rhythmic click of heels outside my door. The enforcer in crimson was early. I opened the door before she could knock. Margaret stood there with her usual weapon, that red binder, pressed against her ribs. "Mr. Brooks," she began smoothly, "we need to discuss your behavior last night." "My behavior?" I asked, stepping aside. "You mean telling the truth?" Her smile was razor thin. "Defamation is still actionable under state law. You may want to reconsider the accusations you're throwing around." I crossed my arms. "And you might want to reconsider falsifying signatures on your expense reports." That wiped the smirk clean off her face. The clipboard queen tilted her head slightly, studying me, as if recalculating the next move in her mental chessboard. "I don't know what you think you've found," she said carefully, "but if you've accessed private documents without permission—" "They were public filings," I interrupted. "You just assumed no one would check." The officer of rules took a breath, slow and measured. "You're playing a dangerous game, Mr. Brooks. People who make enemies here don't last long." I stepped closer. "Neither do dictators who forget who owns the land beneath their feet." Her eyes flickered, just enough to betray unease. She glanced toward the street where a few residents were pretending not to watch. "You're making this worse for your family." "By standing up to you?" I said. "Good. Maybe they'll finally see who's really pulling the strings here." She turned sharply on her heel, heels tapping like gunshots against concrete. "You'll regret this." "I already do," I muttered under my breath. That same afternoon, Maria called from the precinct. Her voice carried tension. "You're not going to like this. Margaret just filed an injunction request. She's claiming harassment and interference with HOA operations." I felt my pulse spike. "She's turning it legal." "Not yet," Maria replied. "It's a scare tactic. She's hoping you'll fold before she does." "She doesn't understand," I said quietly. "Filing. Paperwork doesn't scare me. It's how I win." That night, I returned to my home office. The blinds drawn, laptop glowing faint blue across the room. I logged into the state compliance database and began tracing Crimson Partners LLC. It led to a P.O. box, the same postal code as Margaret's personal residence. The tyrant in heels hadn't even bothered hiding her trail, but I needed evidence beyond digital footprints, something physical, something she couldn't deny. At 10:47 p.m., I received an encrypted message from Jenna. "She's meeting with the contractor tomorrow at the clubhouse. Red binder in hand, says it's about security upgrades. I can stall her 5 minutes. Bring your camera." I typed back one word: "Understood." The next day I arrived early, blending in with a group of residents waiting for an HOA safety inspection. From across the room, I spotted her, the board chair, confident as ever, flipping open her binder and pointing at line items like a CEO unveiling plans for expansion. The contractor nodded uneasily. I saw it. A thick envelope slipped under the table. I raised my phone discreetly, the camera catching every motion, the transfer, the smirk, the brief handshake. Margaret froze mid-sentence when she saw me standing near the doorway. "You're trespassing," she hissed. "On public property during a public meeting?" I said, lowering my phone. "I don't think so." Her mask cracked, just for a breath. The officer of rules straightened, eyes burning. "Whatever you think you've captured won't help you." I smiled faintly. "No, Margaret, but it'll help the state auditor." Her face went pale, the first time I'd ever seen her lose composure completely. As I left the clubhouse, my heart was pounding, not from fear, but clarity. The game had shifted. The clipboard queen wasn't just corrupt, she was careless, and that, in my world, was fatal. The footage burned in my mind all night. Margaret Corbin sliding that envelope across the table like it was routine, like extortion was just another Tuesday policy. The board chair thought she was untouchable, but for the first time, I had leverage. Something concrete, something she couldn't twist with her words or rewrite in a meeting memo. At dawn, I sent the video to Maria's secure server. Within minutes, she called back. "You realize this qualifies as procurement fraud, right?" "I do," I said. "And I'm guessing our enforcer in Crimson doesn't have a city permit for those security upgrades she's billing residents for." Maria's tone darkened. "You're right, the contractor's license expired last year. She's funneling money through a dead company." "That's not just corruption," I murmured. "That's a felony." But Margaret wouldn't go down quietly. By noon, I received an HOA-wide email from the clipboard queen herself. Effective immediately, surveillance violations and defamation against the board will result in immediate legal action. The subject line read, "Community Integrity Enforcement." The irony was suffocating. Within hours, a private security van parked at the entrance of Silverwood. Cameras were installed on lampposts, pointed directly toward my home. Neighbors began whispering, avoiding eye contact. Margaret was staging her counterattack, building the illusion that I was dangerous. But illusions crumble under light. I called Jenna. "We need to act before she fabricates evidence." "I know," she said nervously. "She's in her office right now, sealing files. She knows something's coming." "Can you keep her occupied?" 10 minutes, Jenna said. "Maybe 15. That was all I needed. I drove straight to the HOA office. The lobby was empty except for the echo of heels in the corridor. The the tyrant in heels herself, barking orders at a junior clerk. I slipped into the adjacent conference room, where the board stored copies of public minutes and financial notices. Every binder was identical, navy blue, embossed with the HOA crest, except one. A red one sat half hidden under a stack of folders. The officer of rules always guarded that binder like her life depended on it. But right now, she was too busy pretending nothing was wrong. I opened it carefully. Inside, her neat handwriting filled every page. Board motions that were never voted on, fake signatures, and a paper trail of funds redirected to Crimson Partners, LLC. Every date matched my digital evidence. Every forged name traced back to her. I snapped high-resolution photos of every page. Then I saw something new, an unsigned document dated for tomorrow. Resolution 9B, immediate revocation of residency, Brooks family. My hands froze. She wasn't just covering her tracks. She was preparing to evict us. Suddenly I heard the door creak. "Looking for something?" Margaret's voice sliced through the silence. The board chair stood in the doorway, red blazer sharp as ever, eyes cold. "You really think you can outsmart me, Mr. Brooks?" I slid the binder shut slowly. "I don't need to. You did that yourself." Her lips curled into a smirk. "You think your little recordings will mean anything when the board votes unanimously against you? You're already finished." "That's where you're wrong," I said. "The state auditor already has the files, every contract, every forged authorization." Her smile faltered. "You wouldn't dare." "I already did." For the first time, she blinked, uncertainty flickering across her perfect composure. "You're bluffing," she said, voice quieter now. "Am I?" I opened my phone, showing her the time-stamped email. "They'll review this within 72 hours, and once they do, they'll audit your entire board." The enforcer in crimson stepped back, clutching her binder like a shield. "You think this community will stand with you after this chaos?" "They don't have to," I said. "They just have to see you for what you are." Margaret's jaw locked. "You've made a mistake." "No," I replied. "You did, when you touched my daughter's life and thought I'd stay quiet." Her silence said everything. For the first time, she had no rule to quote, no form to sign, no order to hide behind. I walked past her, the red binder still in my hand. "You'll want to hold your next meeting early, Margaret," I said, without looking back, "before the subpoenas arrive." The hallway lights flickered above her as I left, the echo of her heels no longer confident, just hollow. The clipboard queen had finally realized what happens when control meets consequences. And this time, I wasn't the one under investigation. By the next morning, word spread faster than the sunrise. Someone, I suspected the board chair herself, had gone door to door, whispering that I had hacked the HOA database. Silverwood's peaceful streets felt poisoned with paranoia. Curtains shifted when I walked by. Cars slowed as if I were contagious. That was Margaret Corbin's power. She didn't just enforce rules, she rewrote reputations. Still, I wasn't backing down. The red binder, now safely scanned and stored, was my leverage. But I needed one more thing. A voice from the inside. Someone who could confirm what I'd uncovered. And that someone was Jenna. She was the HOA's record keeper. Technically loyal to the officer of rules, but she'd seen too much to stay quiet. She met me behind the maintenance shed that afternoon, glancing around like a spy in her own neighborhood. "She's panicking," Jenna said, eyes darting. "You hit her where it hurts. The image. She's shredding everything that links her to Crimson Partners. She's even blaming me for misfiling the reports." "She's setting you up," I said. "That's what she does." Jenna swallowed hard. "I know, and I can't keep covering for her." I pulled out my phone and showed her the recorded footage from the clubhouse. "I don't want you in the crossfire, Jenna, but if you're willing to testify, even just a statement, we can end this." She hesitated, wringing her hands. "You don't understand. The last time someone tried to challenge her, their home association privileges were revoked. They couldn't use the pool, the gates, nothing. It ruined them." I took a deep breath. "Then let's ruin her first." The clipboard queen wasn't invincible. She was terrified of exposure. And once people saw that fear, the facade would collapse. That night, I received a text from Jenna. "Meet me at the clubhouse at 9 p.m. I'll bring what you need." When I arrived, the place was dark except for one flickering security light near the parking lot. I waited, checking my watch, until the creak of a door made me turn. Jenna stepped out, clutching a due manila envelope. "She keeps copies of board decisions in her car trunk," she whispered. "I took these before she could destroy them. It's all in here, forged votes, invoices, bribes. She even signed her husband's name to one." Before I could respond, headlights washed over us. A black sedan rolled in, stopping just a few feet away. The door opened, and out stepped the enforcer in crimson herself. Margaret's expression was calm. Too calm. "Evening, Jenna. Mr. Brooks. Late meeting?" Jenna froze, the envelope trembling in her hands. I stepped forward. "You're done, Margaret." She tilted her head, that venomous smile returning. "Oh, am I? Because last I checked, you're trespassing after hours on HOA property." "This is public ground," I shot back, "and your surveillance cameras will confirm it." "Ah," she said, circling slowly. "About those cameras. It would be such a shame if the footage malfunctioned tonight." Jenna's voice shook. "Margaret, please! I didn't mean—" "Quiet!" snapped the tyrant in heels, her heels scraping against the pavement like knives. "You were my assistant, my eyes, my ears. And now you're what? A whistleblower? You think anyone will believe a clerk over the chairwoman of Silverwood?" That's when I stepped between them. They won't have to believe her. They'll believe the auditors. The files are already sent. For the first time, the board chair looked unsettled. "You're bluffing again." "No," I said. This time, I came prepared. I opened my phone and pressed play. The video projected her voice across the quiet lot. Margaret's voice, sharp and unmistakable. "The invoices go through Crimson. No questions. I'll sign the rest later." Her eyes widened. "Delete that." "You first," I said, nodding to the red binder still on her passenger seat. The silence that followed was electric. Jenna took a shaky step back, whispering, "It's over, Margaret. I'm done protecting you." The officer of rules inhaled deeply, trying to steady herself. "You're making a mistake," she said softly. "You think people will thank you? They'll turn on you. They always do." I met her gaze. "Maybe, but at least I'll still be able to look my daughter in the eye." Margaret didn't answer. She turned away, sliding into her car with slow, deliberate grace. But her mask had cracked. The clipboard queen wasn't issuing orders tonight. She was retreating. When her taillights vanished into the dark, Jenna exhaled shakily. "You think she'll actually go down for this?" "Oh," I said, glancing toward the folder in her hands. "I'm counting on it. Because this time, it wasn't just about HOA rules or fake fines. It was about a bully who thought she could police everyone, until she met someone who understood how to fight her legally. The first domino had fallen. The next 48 hours were chaos. Rumors exploded through Silverwood like wildfire. Some claimed I'd hacked the HOA servers. Others whispered that the board chair was under state investigation. Both were true, in their own way. Margaret Corbin had gone silent, which made her more dangerous. The absence of her voice was louder than her threats. I'd seen this pattern before in courtrooms, when guilty people started realizing control was slipping through their fingers. But the pressure wasn't just on her, it was on us. Jenna's phone kept buzzing with blocked numbers. My daughter's wheelchair was vandalized outside the front porch. The bolts loosened just enough to send a message. No words were needed. The signature was clear. The enforcer in crimson was lashing out. I spent the morning reinforcing security cameras and checking locks, but the damage wasn't physical. It was psychological. Margaret wanted me paranoid, distracted, afraid. It was classic intimidation. Make the truth-teller look unstable before the truth surfaces. Maria arrived around noon, dropping her badge on my counter. "You sure you're ready for this?" she asked. "I've handled worse," I said, "but I need it airtight. If the board collapses, she'll try to claim it's political targeting." Maria nodded. "We've already pulled her company's tax records. Crimson Partners never filed under HOA-approved vendors. That's 3 separate fraud counts. Minimum." I leaned back. She's boxed in, but she'll try to burn everything before it hits the light. Right on cue, Jenna texted, "She's called an emergency meeting for tonight. Closed doors. She's nervous. She's drafting a motion to suspend you permanently from the neighborhood." Perfect. That was exactly what I needed. That evening, I walked into the clubhouse, the place buzzing with forced calm. Every board member was there, except Margaret. The clipboard queen made her entrance last, striding in with her crimson blazer like a war general. "Mr. Brooks," she said, her tone syrupy but sharp, "you're not on the agenda tonight." "I noticed," I said. "Neither was embezzlement last week, but you found time for that." Gasps rippled through the room. The officer of rules lifted her chin. "You're out of line." "No," I said, setting a printed audit on the table. "You are." The documents hit the table like a gavel. Itemized expenses, vendor overlaps, duplicate payments to Crimson Partners LLC, each page stamped by the state auditor's office. "This is slander," she snapped. "It's evidence," I corrected. The silence that followed was suffocating. Even her allies, those who once applauded every motion she made, looked uneasy now. I turned toward the room. "Every one of you has been signing off on these reports, thinking you were approving landscaping or security cameras. But look closely. The same company billed the HOA for 2 years straight under different vendor names, and every check ended up in her account." The tyrant in heels tried to speak, but I didn't stop. "This isn't about me anymore. It's about every family she's fined, every veteran she's threatened, every disabled resident she's humiliated for non-compliance. You've been paying for her power trip." Her face hardened. "You're twisting the truth?" I cut in. "No, Margaret. That's what you've done your whole career." The room was shifting. I could feel it, the subtle unraveling of loyalty. One man stood, clearing his throat. "Madam Chair, is this true?" Margaret didn't answer. Her fingers tapped the table like a ticking clock. The enforcer in crimson was calculating, searching for an escape route that didn't exist. "Meeting adjourned," she said finally, slamming her gavel. "No." Jenna's voice came from the back. She stepped forward, pale but resolute. "You don't get to end this. Not anymore." The room froze. Jenna laid the folder on the table, the one she'd taken from Margaret's trunk. "Here are the original invoices, Margaret, the ones you altered. Your handwriting's on every page." The clipboard queen looked like she'd been struck. "You stole those?" "I recovered them," Jenna replied. "You were destroying evidence." For the first time, the invincible board chair had nothing to say. Maria stepped from the doorway, badge flashing. "Margaret Corbin, you're under investigation for fraud, falsification of public records, and misuse of association funds." Gasps filled the room again, this time sharper, heavier. Margaret's expression twisted, pride collapsing into panic. "You can't do this," she said, voice cracking. "You don't understand what this place would be without me." I stepped closer. "Peaceful." She glared at me, her empire of rules collapsing around her like glass. The officer of rules had finally broken the one law she couldn't rewrite: the truth. When Maria cuffed her wrists, the only sound left was the gavel rolling off the table and clattering onto the tile. And in that echo, Silverwood finally exhaled. They say when a tyrant falls, the silence afterward is deafening. But in Silverwood, it wasn't silence. It was confusion. For the first time in years, people didn't know who was in charge. The HOA website went dark, meetings were temporarily postponed, and every homeowner was suddenly afraid of their own mailbox. Margaret Corbin's arrest should have ended everything, but nothing about the board chair ever stayed simple. Within 24 hours, she'd posted bail. The news didn't mention the words fraud or forgery, just administrative discrepancies under review. Her attorney called it a misunderstanding. That was her true gift, twisting the narrative until even guilt looked like governance. I watched from my front porch as a white sedan rolled into the neighborhood the next morning. Margaret stepped out, no longer handcuffed, but defiant. Her crimson blazer was gone, replaced by a black one, as if she were mourning her own reputation. The neighbors froze, unsure whether to greet her or hide behind their curtains. The enforcer in crimson had returned. Only this time, she'd changed uniform and tactics. "Can she even be here?" my wife asked from the doorway. "Technically," I said. "Until the board votes her out, she's still the acting chair." "She's bold," my wife whispered. "Or desperate." I nodded. "Both." Margaret didn't look at my house, but she didn't need to. The tension was deliberate, a warning disguised as normalcy. Within hours, she began holding informal gatherings at the clubhouse, claiming she was restoring order. Some residents, weary of the chaos, went along with it. Others didn't. Jenna wasn't among them. She's rewriting the minutes, Jenna told me later that day, sliding into the booth across from me at the diner. Her voice trembled. She's deleting every reference to Crimson Partners from the system. How? I asked. She bribed the IT vendor, said it was a data cleaning contract. I exhaled slowly, anger simmering beneath my calm. She's purging evidence before the audit hits. Jenna nodded. And she's spreading rumors that you fabricated the footage. Of course she was. The clipboard queen had learned that control didn't come from power. It came from perception. And if she could rewrite the story fast enough, the truth wouldn't matter. That night, I stayed up combing through backups, cloud storage, security footage, every traceable byte of data I had. By midnight, I found something new. Hidden in the metadata of one video was an overlooked line. Invoice, -45B community, event sponsorship, PDF, signed by M. Corbin. It wasn't just financial fraud. It was bribery. The event sponsorship had been a front for personal kickbacks. This was the nail in the coffin. I forwarded it straight to Maria with the subject, "Final piece." She replied within minutes, "We'll serve her tomorrow. Be ready." But I wasn't prepared for what came next. At 6 a.m., I heard tires crunching on gravel. When I opened my blinds, there she was, Margaret Corbin herself, standing on my lawn, clipboard in hand, like it was still her kingdom. She smiled. "Mr. Brooks, you've violated Neighborhood Code 8C, unauthorized surveillance equipment installed without board approval." I stepped onto the porch, heart pounding, but voice steady. "That footage saved this community from your scams." She tilted her head, her tone sweet venom. "And it will also cost you your residency. Funny how justice works, isn't it?" The officer of rules wasn't there to enforce. She was there to provoke. My daughter wheeled out from behind the door. "Dad?" Margaret's expression faltered just for a second, guilt or maybe realization, before she looked away. "You shouldn't involve her," she said quietly. I met her gaze. "You already did." For the first time since this war began, the tyrant in heels looked human, exhausted, cornered, almost hollow. "You think you've won," she whispered, "but you've turned everyone against each other. You've destroyed what made this place safe." "What made it safe," I said, stepping closer, "was people believing they had no choice. That ends today." Her eyes flashed, but her voice broke. "You don't understand what I've built." "Oh, I do," I said. "You built a cage and called it community." She turned away, shaking, clutching her clipboard like a lifeline. "This isn't over." "No," I said quietly. "It's almost over." The next morning, when state auditors arrived with their subpoenas, the residents gathered outside. Margaret Corbin didn't fight this time. She simply stood at the gate, watching as her nameplate was pried off the HOA office door. The board chair had finally lost the one thing she couldn't buy back: control. But as the crowd murmured, I noticed something chilling: her faint, defiant smile. The kind of smile that promised the storm wasn't gone, only redirected. By the time dawn broke over Silverwood, the neighborhood wasn't the same. There was a hush over everything, the kind that comes when people are afraid to admit they've been complicit. Mailboxes overflowed with silence. Driveways stayed empty. For once, even the gossip lines were quiet, but I knew it wouldn't last. Margaret Corbin didn't disappear. She regrouped. Every tyrant does. By noon, the board chair was back at the clubhouse, dressed in that same crimson blazer that had once been a symbol of power, and now looked more like a warning flag. She was hosting what she called a restoration meeting. The irony almost made me laugh. The same woman who destroyed every trace of transparency now claimed she wanted peace. But peace was never her goal. It was control. Always control. I parked 2 streets over and walked in with Maria and Jenna by my side. The moment we stepped through the doors, every conversation stopped. A dozen residents sat in folding chairs, facing Margaret as if she were still royalty. Behind her, the HOA seal gleamed under fluorescent light. Her throne, her stage. She smiled thinly. "Mr. Brooks, Ms. Santos, Ms. Rivera, how punctual." "I figured if this was about restoration," I said, "you'd want the people who did the restoring." Her expression didn't crack. "Let's not rewrite history, shall we? You attacked this board, you slandered our integrity, and you turned my neighbors against me." Margaret, Maria said, her voice calm but sharp. You forged financial documents. You took community funds. You falsified minutes. That's not leadership. That's criminal. A behavior. The enforcer in crimson laughed softly, the sound brittle and hollow. Do you know what this community was before me? Filth, noise, unruly pets, illegal rentals. I cleaned it up. I gave it standards, rules, order. You gave it fear, I said. Her gaze snapped to me, eyes burning, and fear kept it perfect. The room went still. Even her former allies looked uneasy now. The clipboard queen had stopped pretending. This wasn't a debate anymore. It was confession disguised as justification. You think you can replace me? She went on, pacing slowly. You think chaos won't fill the vacuum? You'll see how quickly they turn on you when the fines stop coming in and the trash piles up. Jenna stepped forward. People don't need punishment to be decent, Margaret. They need trust. Trust? The tyrant in heels sneered. You're the one who betrayed me. You handed over documents that weren't yours. They were everyone's, Jenna said quietly. That silenced even her. I stepped closer, setting a small recorder on the table. This meeting is on record. You can stop pretending this is about order. It's about ownership. And yours just expired. For the first time, her mask cracked. A flicker of fear crossed her face before rage replaced it. You don't scare me, she said, voice trembling with fury. You never did. I don't have to, I said. The law does. Maria placed an envelope in front of her. The Attorney General's office has filed preliminary charges, financial fraud, tampering with evidence, civil abuse of authority. The color drained from Margaret's face. Her voice lowered to a whisper. You really think you've won? When this hits the news, Silverwood will crumble. Property values will tank. You'll have turned this entire neighborhood into a circus. No, I said. You already did that. We're just pulling down the tent. Her eyes met mine for a long, cold moment. And in them, I saw the truth. Margaret Corbin wasn't just afraid of losing power. She was afraid of becoming invisible. For someone like her, obscurity was death. When the residents began murmuring, the officer of rules tried to regain her footing. I won't step down, she declared. You can't make me. Maria nodded once. Actually, they can. According to Silverwood's bylaws, an acting chair under felony investigation forfeits authority pending judicial review. Jenna held out a folder. The board has already voted. The gavel on the table no longer belonged to Margaret. She stared at it like it was a weapon she'd forgotten how to use. Slowly, she reached for it, but I stopped her hand halfway. Not this time, I said softly. Her voice cracked. You think this ends with me? It doesn't. There's always another HOA, another Margaret. Maybe, I said, but not here. I turned toward the residents. Silverwood isn't a prison anymore. It's a neighborhood again. As Margaret was escorted out, her crimson blazer flashed one last time beneath the cold overhead lights. A relic of a regime collapsing under its own arrogance. The board chair was gone, but her shadow lingered, and I knew, deep down, that justice was only the first step. Healing would take longer. Outside, the air felt different, lighter, cleaner, free. And for the first time in years, Silverwood finally belonged to its people again. The public hearing was set for Friday evening, and by noon, the entire county knew about it. The story had spread faster than wildfire, neighbors whispering at grocery stores, reporters camped outside the clubhouse, cameras flashing across the freshly mowed lawns of Silverwood. For years, Margaret Corbin had ruled this neighborhood like a fiefdom. Now, the board chair would face the very people she'd punished, fined, and humiliated. The auditorium buzzed with tension. Rows of folding chairs were filled with residents, city officials, and the press. On stage sat the board, a hollow shell of what it once was. Margaret entered last, flanked by her attorney, her crimson blazer pressed and gleaming under the lights, a costume for a fallen monarch. Even now, she carried herself like authority incarnate. Chin high, eyes cold, the enforcer in crimson didn't bow, didn't flinch. She scanned the room and smiled like this was just another meeting she'd dominate. I stood near the aisle beside Maria and Jenna. The air was electric, part courtroom, part reckoning. Call this hearing to order, said the interim chair, a mild-mannered man who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Tonight's purpose is to review formal misconduct allegations against former board chair Margaret Corbin. The murmurs began immediately. Words like abuse, fraud, extortion hung in the air like ghosts. Margaret's attorney rose first. My client maintains that all accusations stem from political vendettas and personal grudges. The financial discrepancies are clerical, not criminal. A scoff rippled through the room. Maria leaned forward at the prosecution table. We'll let the evidence speak. She tapped her folder. Exhibit A, unauthorized use of HOA funds for personal gain. The screen behind her flickered to life, displaying payment records, forged invoices, and deposits made directly into Crimson Partners' account. Each line item hit like a hammer. Margaret's smile didn't fade. All reimbursements were board approved, she said smoothly. Every expenditure benefited the community. Like your landscaping contractor charging $40,000 for decorative shrubs? Maria asked. The clipboard queen didn't miss a beat. Those were imported evergreens. Imported from where? Your backyard? The crowd erupted in gasps and muffled laughter. For the first time, I saw Margaret blink, but she recovered quickly, turning her venom toward me. And you, she said, her voice slicing through the noise, you're the self-righteous prosecutor who thinks this is justice? You dragged your own neighborhood through the mud for attention. Congratulations, Mr. Brooks. You destroyed the peace you pretended to protect. I stepped forward, calm but deliberate. You broke a child's wheelchair for a dress code violation, Margaret. The only peace you ever protected was your own ego. Her eyes narrowed. Pure ice. You think this ends with me? You'll miss me when the chaos starts. That's what tyrants always say, I replied. The tyrant in heels turned to the board. You're making a mistake. Without me, this place will rot. I was the law here. The interim chair spoke quietly. You were never the law. You were the leash. For a moment, the silence was heavy, suffocating. Then Maria stood again. Exhibit B, testimony from former enforcement officer, Jenna Rivera. Jenna rose, palms trembling slightly but voice steady. I worked under Ms. Corbin for 3 years. She ordered us to issue fake violations, to pressure families, to collect fines that never went into the HOA fund. Margaret scoffed. Disgruntled employees say anything to save themselves. Then explain this, Jenna said, projecting an image of Margaret's signature approving a disciplinary fine against a family whose account had already been cleared. The officer of rules stared at her own handwriting on the screen. For the first time, she looked small. The crowd erupted. Anger, applause, vindication all at once. The interim chair banged his gavel. Order! When the noise subsided, Maria approached Margaret's table. Do you have anything to say before this board votes on your removal? Margaret rose slowly. Yes, she said, voice trembling but proud. You'll regret this, every one of you. You think freedom feels good now, but wait until someone else decides what you can plant, paint, or wear. You'll beg for me back. Her words landed like poison, but they didn't stick. I met her eyes. No one's begging for chains, Margaret. We're just learning to breathe again. The vote was swift, unanimous. Margaret Corbin was permanently banned from holding any HOA position in the state. As she walked out, her crimson jacket caught the light one last time, bright, proud, defiant. But this time, no one stood when she passed. The board chair was no longer feared. She was finished. Outside, flashbulbs popped. Residents gathered in small clusters, whispering, crying, hugging. Jenna exhaled shakily. It's really over. I looked at the empty doorway. Not yet, I said. Not until every person she hurt believes it. And somewhere beyond the lights, I swore I heard her voice again, soft, bitter, and promising. You can take my title, but you'll never erase my rules. The morning after the hearing, Silverwood woke different. The air smelled of cut grass and rain instead of fear. For the first time in years, nobody was waiting for letters stamped violation notice. The HOA office door hung half open, its seal cracked down the middle like the community's old silence. Margaret Corbin was gone, but not forgotten. Her house stood dark at the end of Birch Lane, blinds drawn, mailbox empty. Yet her name was still whispered, like a habit people couldn't quit. The board chair had ruled so long that even freedom felt strange. I walked the cul-de-sac in the early light. Neighbors waved again. Kids rode bikes where no play zones once stood. The playground gate, once padlocked for maintenance, swung open. Small sounds of ordinary life replaced the tension that used to hum beneath every sunrise. Maria joined me, coffee in hand. "Feels unreal, doesn't it?" "Like the neighborhood exhaled," I said. She smiled faintly. "Justice is heavy before it's light." We both turned toward the clubhouse. Crews were already removing the plaques Margaret had installed, her self-portraits disguised as community branding. When one worker pried off the bronze sign reading "Excellence through Order," it clattered to the pavement with a hollow ring. That sound, that was freedom's echo. Inside, Jenna was already setting up new forms, transparent ones. No hidden clauses, no scare tactics. "We'll start with open meetings," she said. "No more secrets." "Good," I replied. Let the light do what rules never could. By noon, a local reporter arrived. "Mr. Brooks," she asked, recorder out, "how does it feel to bring down the most infamous HOA chair in the county?" I hesitated. It wasn't about bringing her down. It was about standing up for everyone she silenced. That evening, I found myself outside Margaret's house. Curiosity, maybe closure, pulled me there. The enforcer in crimson appeared in the window for just a second, hair undone, eyes hollow. She didn't look like power anymore. She looked like consequence. She stepped onto the porch, no blazer, no clipboard. "You couldn't let it die quietly, could you?" she said. "I didn't kill anything," I answered. "Truth did." Her voice cracked. "You think they'll thank you when the assessments rise and order fades? You need people like me." "Maybe," I said softly, "but we don't need fear." For a heartbeat, she almost looked relieved. Then she shut the door, the click echoing like a curtain drop. That was the last time anyone in Silverwood saw her. Weeks passed. The lawns grew wild in places. Kids painted chalk dragons on driveways, and laughter replaced complaint letters. Some called it messy. I called it human. At the next community meeting, the clipboard queen's empty chair sat in the corner, unclaimed. Maria opened with a line that stayed with me. "Rules can protect us, but they should never own us." Applause filled the room. Not polite, not forced, real. Later that night, under porch lights strung across the cul-de-sac, neighbors gathered for the first true block party Silverwood had ever seen. Barbecue smoke mixed with music. People who'd once avoided each other now danced barefoot on driveways. Even the air seemed to forgive itself. I looked around and realized something simple. Margaret Corbin had built walls so tall that everyone forgot how to see each other. All I'd really done was open a gate. Still, part of me couldn't shake her final words. There's always another HOA, another Margaret. She wasn't wrong. Power always looks for new fences to build. But as long as someone's willing to stand in the doorway and say no, it never wins for long. I took one last look at her dark house and whispered, "Rest easy, officer of rules." Silverwood learned. Then I turned back to the laughter, to the lights, to life. If you've ever faced someone who mistook control for leadership, remember, silence is their weapon. Your voice is the antidote. If you want more stories of homeowners standing up to HOA tyranny, hit subscribe right now, share your story in the comments, and tell me where you're watching from. Because somewhere, another boardroom is plotting, and another homeowner is about to rise.